At least some of those who would describe themselves as big thinkers, engaged in elevated discourse, might often discuss topics like ontology, or the methodological examination and study of being and reality, a branch of metaphysics that explores what exists and how things relate to each other, delving into topics like first causes or even proximal origins, a term with which some may be familiar, especially after the most recent global public health crisis, during which time the nation's public schools had decided almost from the beginning to close doors to in-person instruction. And like in 2021, when foremost on the minds of most Virginia voters was the topic of education and the process of safe reopening of schools, only this year are some now revisiting that topic of the consequences of those school closures, some of which certainly could have been and reasonably should have been anticipated proactively, especially with regard to disparate outcomes for students already afflicted with persistent performance issues in a scholastic achievement gap, primarily children of color. Probably one of the most immediate awarenesses of disparities surprisingly did not begin to occur, at least in the press, until the fall of 2022, with the news accounts about the National Report Card, which had found a state like Virginia, one of the most educated states by degree credentials, ranked 6th in the nation for losses in mathematics and reading aptitude. And that's not a top 10 that you want to be in, as measured on standardized tests. The direct and proximal consequences of public school closures, finding now students of all colors afflicted by an achievement gap with its associated devastating and long-lasting effects, to include future earnings potential, which some had in defense attempted to downplay, suggesting that these tests are not really a test of aptitude or intelligence, but far more sounding akin to rationalizations to avoid responsibility to address a very real problem for children in public schools. Face it, even if you join the Army, you are going to have to take an aptitude test. And the scores on those tests are going to determine whether or not you are in the infantry or flying jets. As former Chief Justice Earl Warren had written for the majority in the landmark decision Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas in 1954, education is perhaps the most important function of state and local governments, and such an opportunity where the state has undertaken to provide it is a right which must be made available to all on equal terms. An entitlement which has been recognized by the Supreme Court as having a property-like quality that is entitled to some level of due process. Chief Justice Warren had observed that compulsory school attendance laws demonstrate our recognition of the importance of education to our democratic society. And while now reports are beginning to emerge regarding record absences amongst children returning to public schools in Virginia, lost in the news reports are the subtle nuances regarding what had been systemic problems unaddressed even before the pandemic, when school boards were focused on other issues, like the recent decision in Petersburg to begin taking daily attendance, and then only beginning at 10 a.m., long after homeroom. And according to the former superintendent at Arlington Public Schools, Dr. Peter Murphy, Arlington had just begun taking attendance when he came on board in 2009, the year after President Barack Obama had been elected. They say that 90% of life is just showing up. And even though President Obama had even delivered a commencement speech at one high school graduation, which may have been inspiring for a lot of persons who attended, when he looked down at those students, statistically, he didn't see himself. Keep it real. That's not rocket science. At least any military commander knows, or financial institution manager. Accountability is a basic part of management, like tracking that which had been budgeted and measuring the variances from that which is actualized. A term from cost accounting that is imported into management in the conduct of in progress and after action reviews, IPRs and AARs. And it is significant to note that like there were no in-progress reviews conducted while the public school divisions throughout 2 years of cancellation of in-person instruction were occurring, many are now running away and or pointing fingers at others rather than conducting that AAR to develop lessons learned and address a very real problem that directly impacts the futures of these children. According to the majority opinion in the landmark Brown decision also, the great expenditures for education also demonstrates our recognition of the importance of education to our democratic society, putting our money where our mouth is, so to speak. And public school education accounts for the largest expenditure in the local government budgets. The teachers union has said that what is good for the teachers is ultimately good for the kids, and have used these arguments to push for higher salaries for teachers to attract more quality candidates to come in to teach in schools. And in communities like Arlington County, which boasts of having the second best public schools in the entire state, this expenditure exceeds $20,000 per pupil, the highest expenditure of any suburban public school district in the national capital region, including more affluent communities like Chevy Chase and McLean. And whether these tests have any value finds its best test in the admissions to colleges amongst graduating seniors. While affirming students with respecting their choices of personal pronoun preferences may appear important to some, have you ever seen the face of a child who receives a college rejection letter? Well, according to local press reports from ARL Now, Arlington Public School students had broken records in college applications, and quite comprehensive statistics have been published by Arlington Magazine regarding the class of 2022 in the Arlington Public Schools, the second best public schools in the entire Commonwealth of Virginia. And it appears that the best assessment of the performance of these public schools to determine or measure the bang for the buck is not so much where educators have shifted the public attention on topics like core community values, diversity and inclusion, and even critical race theory, but rather by the budgeted measure of the competitive colleges to which these students breaking records in applications had applied are actualizing through being accepted and matriculating in the fall, and computing that variance, which may be a more salient consideration that might better resonate with at least some parents of students in public schools. Get a clear picture of the threat. And at least according to these raw data reports, 86% of the class of 2022 in Arlington that may have planned to attend Howard University, the premier HBCU just across the Potomac, were weighed by the scales and found wanting, deemed not Howard material. While JMU has recently been identified by the Wall Street Journal as one of the top party schools in the nation and a very popular choice for children in Arlington Public Schools, with over 500 of 1,800 students submitting applications in 2022, some 52% of students concerned about potty room issues had failed to receive an acceptance letter to a top party school. And even worse, you have a 93% chance as a student to be accepted to VCU in Richmond. But some 40% of these students in the second best public schools in the state had defied the gravity of hitting the floor after falling from a chair, and you are not going to work on anything in climate change or enjoy a STEM career and high salary if you can't do that math and understand that science. So Where do we go from here is the question. My name is Major Mike Webb, and by God, I am running for state delegate, Virginia's 3rd District. Major in the majors. Focused on education, focused on schools, and focused on the future. Honest. This message was approved by Major Mike Webb. Honest.